looking at this graph here, is this a sine graph or a cosine graph? Raise your hand. Well, okay, let's start off with real basics here. Raise your hands if you think it is a tan graph. Oh, I think that, it's always one. Apart from one person, everyone else can see that it's not a tan graph. That's a relief. You are welcome to stay in methods 4 now, so that's good. Raise your hands if you think it is a sine graph. Not everyone. Raise your hands if you think it's a cosine graph. Okay, if you said it was a cosine graph, you would be correct. If you said it was a sine graph, you would be correct. It could be either. We don't know. So remember that sine and cosine have the same sinusoidal wave, and we actually could create a sine or a cosine graph if we were just said, find the function. Fortunately, not fortunately really, but in practice, in a test, you'll be asked almost always, no, I think always really, you'll be asked to fit a particular form. Because if we don't ask you that, then there's 1,000,001 answers, right? So by forcing you to do a particular form, we go here. So you need to have enough information, and the information will change, but this is pretty common, which is why I'm giving it to you as an example here. So we can see that we've got a maximum value of 5 that goes along here, and a minimum value of 1. And we can see that the maximum x coordinate is pi on 4, and the next maximum is 5 pi on 4. So this is all the information that we've been given. Now, I've got it as a sketch in my notes so that you can see it, but I just wanted you to see it looking exactly how it should do as opposed to my sketch, which is not exactly how it should do. Okay, so how do we go about solving it? Effectively, we look at the question, and it says, find the equation of the line given the form, and this is where we now know we need what we aim for. A cos n x plus b plus c. Notice, by the way, that I just wanted to point this out because this is what it is on the information sheet. I tend to put brackets around the cos n, the whole thing there, to say this whole thing has been applied to the cosine function. But the information sheet doesn't put that main set of brackets in. It's one of those weird things that mathematicians do, that they don't want to have too many brackets floating about, so sometimes they make exceptions. But it's not cos times n, it is just cosine, and then the argument going into cosine is n times x plus b. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so where we go to from here is a little bit of a choose your own adventure. I'm going to do it in my particular way, but, you know, you don't have to exactly follow the same as me. I'll keep it zoomed out so you can see it. So the solution, the first thing I'm going to do is work out the amplitude, because that's pretty easy to work out. So amplitude. So what am I doing here is I basically need to work out what A, N, B, and C is. So I'm tackling A first because that is amplitude. So the amplitude. The first thing I do is work out the distance from one of the maximums to one of the minimums. Okay, so it goes from 5 down to 1. So that is, I need to know this distance here. So the amplitude, I go 5 minus 1 is equal to 4. Therefore, A is equal to 2. 4 divided by 2, if you can't work out where I got that from. So from the peak to the trough, from the maximum to the minimum, there's a length of 4 units. So therefore, the amplitude is half of that, which is 2 units. Is that okay? So now I know what A is equal to. No questions? When you draw a standard graph, if you remember, Gabe, if I do a standard sine graph like that, the maximum is 1, the minimum is minus 1, so the distance is 2 units, but the amplitude is 1. Yeah, cool. Thank you. Please keep asking questions. Don't need it. Yep. Half the length. So I work out This is not the amplitude. The amplitude is 2. This is my working out. My working out is the length between the troughs, the peak and the trough is 4, and so A has got to be half of that. Okay, cool. If it was flipped over, I would then say A equals -2, but it's not flipped over. It's around the right way, so A is equal to 2. Okay, the next thing I would do is I would work out the centre, and the centre is going to be either take the peak and subtract the amplitude, or the size of the amplitude. Oh, no, amplitude is always positive. So take the peak and subtract the amplitude, or take the trough and add the amplitude. So in my case, I'm going to go 5 minus 2 is equal to 3. Therefore, C is equal to 3, because the vertical translation, remember, is the new centre. What do you think? Is that okay? Just to confirm, if I had taken this value, the trough, the minimum, which is 1, and added 2, I would also get 3. So 5 minus 2 is equal to 3. 1 plus 2 is equal to 3. So that's why the centre and the vertical translation is 3. Chance for questions? Cool. I love them. In fact, I'm getting questions. That's good. Phase shift is the next thing I deal with personally. Again, I might have dealt with this, like someone else might deal with it first, not me. Because it's cosine, I need to remember that for cosine goes from a peak to a trough to a peak again. Okay, so it starts at a maximum. Okay, so I basically do this. I go first peak, is at what? X equals, and looking at it, you can see here's the first peak, it's at pi on 4. So the first peak is at pi on 4, the first maximum is pi on 4. It's to the right, yeah? It's to the right, so that means, therefore, B is equal to negative pi on 4. What do you think? Negative pi on 4 because we've gone to the right. Can I just say, trap for young players? If you were given, find the value of A, B, and C, or A, N, B, and C, and in here, some marker has, or some exam writer has put X minus B, then the value of B would be pi on 4. Be careful. Okay, this is X plus B, so the value of B is minus pi on 4. But if there was a minus B in there, that would be pi on 4. Ultimately, it'll give you the same thing, X minus pi on 4 when we write the equation, but just be careful. Okay, if that's no drama, the only thing we've got left is what? We've worked at A, we've worked at B, we've worked at C. Yay, and N is just the word for it? Yeah, period. That's all I was asking for, but what you said was right from there. So the period. So what I do is I go peak to peak. 2 peaks challenge. Peak to peak is, and so the next peak along was 5 pi on 4. Subtract pi on 4. So I'm getting the length. So that equals 4 pi on 4, which is equal to pi. So that is the period. The period is pi. It's not the value of n, but it is the length of the period. Yeah, honestly, you can choose any 2 points that are the same spot in the next cycle. So I could have gone from center to center, or from lowest to lowest. Anything that you're given, as long as you've got it one more cycle along, then you can subtract them from each other to get it. In this one, I've got a peak and I've got the next peak. Hamish, question? Go for it. Much better if you ask me, because then everyone hears. Yeah. We need to know what the period is from the graph so that we can work out n. So the period is absolutely pi length, because it's the distance from here where cosine starts to where cosine would repeat again. And that distance is pi. Is that making sense? Cool. But yeah, the next step is to put it together, Hamish. If you hadn't asked me, then people wouldn't have heard that. And I'm really glad people heard that. Okay, so please ask me. I really appreciate it. So the next thing is to put it together. Therefore, the period is equal to 2 pi on n. So that means pi equals 2 pi on n. So I'm going to do a swapsy here. If your fraction work is a bit weak, this might be too much for you. But basically, I'm multiplying both sides by n and dividing both sides by pi. So that'll give me n on the left and 2 pi on n. 2 pi on the right. The pi's cancel out. So I've got n is equal to 2. Okay? Now, it says find the function or find the equation of the line. So we put it all together now. I'll just green highlight that one. Just trying to make answers stand out is always good for a marker if you can make your answers stand out if you've got time. So I put it all together now, i.e. y is equal to 2 cos 2 outside of x minus pi on 4 plus 3. Job done. What do you think? Just FYI, I'll capture this in the video, but just FYI, I'll do it in a different color. Here, let's just say if the question was find the equation in the form a sine n blah, 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 blah. So if it was sine that you were asked to find, then instead of finding the first peak, you'd find the first center, the first zero, right? So you would say something like this. First zero, I don't know if there's a better word to use it, but first zero is at x equals 0. Yeah, because there's a 0 there. It's in the center of the graph there, and that's at x equals 0. So you'd say the first 0 is at x equals 0, and so there's no phase shift. Everything else, here, this bit here, this bit here, this bit here, everything else is exactly the same. It's just that you would then conclude that y equals 2 sine 2 x, because there's no phase shift now, plus 3. And that's it. Okay, so this is the phase shift is the only step that's different between sine and cosine. With sine, you're looking from a 0 to a 0 for the phase shift. The first 0, for the phase shift, and everything else is exactly the same. Okay? And I can show you that. Here's a little something I prepared earlier. So there's my cosine graph here. You can see now that I've got that y equals 2 cos 2 x minus pi on 4 plus 3 over this particular period. And you can see if I look at this, which is y equals 2 sine 2x plus 3, if I click on it, it matches exactly. I didn't limit the domain, so that's why it's gone on forever. But it's directly over that red line, okay? So they are equivalent functions. Okay, what do you think? Any questions?